So welcome everybody. Today we have the GOAT of Webflow, Mr. Timothy Ricks. And today he's going to be walking us through his amazing framework called Lumos. So Tim, welcome to the Flow Party. Finally.
Finally. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
I know we tried to get this working for so long now, and we're finally able to meet. So
yeah, awesome. Okay, so you can share your screen or do an introduction, whatever. The floor is yours.
Awesome. All right. I'll share my screen. All right. So yeah, I have just a little slide deck just introducing what Lumos is. And then from there, we'll go into building out an example from Figma to Webflow. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Timothy Ricks. I create content on YouTube teaching people how to build in Webflow. And I'm also a designer and developer at an agency called 368. This past year, I spent 3 months building this framework called Lumos. And I never wanted to build frameworks. It was never my goal. I actually kind of didn't like frameworks so much, but like the larger my sites got that I was working on and the more we started signing maintenance retainers, I just couldn't get around them. So I took a look at everything that's out there and there's a lot of great options, but none of it fit the projects that I work on. So started building something custom and this is how Lumos came out. So Lumos is, the big selling point is it offers consistency at scale. So as your project grows, larger sites, you're going to be able to make global design changes on the fly that update across all kinds of pages. And Lumos, like pretty much every Webflow framework, is a utility-first CSS framework. So that just means it relies on utility classes. Without utility classes, this is kind of the way I used to build for a very long time, is we might have a hero image, a blog card, a team photo that all have this 2.5 rem border radius. And when we do that, Webflow makes it really easy to, just click a couple buttons and keep adding styles to these classes. But when we do that, it's bloating our CSS file and it's also making it harder to maintain in the future. If we want to change 2.5 rem, we had to now go back to every single element that we've ever added that class to and change it one by one. So it's also prone to human error. Like imagine you have a system of 4 different radius that you're using throughout your website and has a developer having to remember what those 4 different values are every time you apply it to a new element, instead of just being able to choose from these 4 styles that you set up front. So anytime we use a framework, there's some time invested in setting it up front that has long-term returns once you're building out a project. So all that to say, this is what it would look like with a utility class. Instead of applying that 2.5 radius to every single element, we create one radius large class that holds the 2.5 value, and we add it to each element one by one. So if we want to change that value, now we only had to change it for one class. And the more elements we add, the more our site grows. We're going to start to see this clean up our code and the efficiency really pay off because we're not having to keep adding it new every time. So the way that utilities are typically handled in traditional development is there's a lot of flexibility, right? We can copy all the utility classes we have on an element. Here I have font weight bold, text color secondary, and text wrap balance utilities. We can copy all those from one element to another. We can replace or delete utilities in the middle of the list without having to delete the ones at the end. We can use keyboard shortcuts to replace every instance of utility across the whole page and rename them. So there's a lot of flexibility as a developer. In Webflow, though, it's pretty limited. There's no way to copy all utilities from one element to another. There's no way to delete a utility or rename it in the middle of the list without having to take off the ones at the end of the list. Webflow just really wasn't built for utility systems. It was built mainly to use custom classes on everything. And basically, the thing that a lot of frameworks will recommend when you get to this, what it's called deep stacking of classes, lots of utilities, is to merge them all together into one class. But that's a lot like merging your layers in Photoshop. You lose a lot of edit control because everything's now in one class. There's no way to make global edits across your whole site. And it kind of defeats the purpose of using utilities to begin with. So this whole pain point was why I stayed away from utilities for a long time. And it was the whole reason that Lumos was created. So with Lumos, the biggest thing is that these utilities, instead of adding them in the style panel in Webflow, the styles had to be created in a custom code embed. That's the way that Lumos works. So this selector that I have highlighted here is targeting any class with BR1 anywhere in the class name. So, and it's applying that border radius. So if I have this team card, I could just include BR1. It doesn't have to be at the end of the class. That's just how it's recommended in Lumos. It could literally be anywhere in this class name. And if those 3 characters are in that class, it's going to get those styles from the custom code embed. So the advantage to this is we can now delete, or by renaming our class, we can delete the utility in the middle of the list. And this can update across every team card, across every page of the site. We could change BR1 to BR2, like a larger border radius, and that's going to update across all team cards. Whereas before we'd had to manually add it one by one to each team card. So it significantly improves the adding and editing utility process. And also, if this team card doesn't have any custom styles, then Webflow won't add this class to this CSS style sheet. So we're not actually bloating our CSS file. We can use these classes, create however many of them we want without adding a single line to our CSS file. And it's just going to keep pulling these styles from our embed that already exist. So it's a really clean, really efficient way. I know years ago, this star selector used to be kind of not the best for performance, and that's why developers stayed away from it. Now it's really great for performance. Like if you measure the speed of how these are applied, it's measured in nanoseconds. It's that fast. So like it's a really clean, really fast way to work. So just the best way to see how Lumos works is to see a little demo. There's a Chrome extension for it that was actually developed by Friends Agency, who's on this call right now. So thank you so much, Friends. And the Chrome extension, what it does is when you go to type your utilities, it's going to show all the values from your Webflow embed. So any values, any utilities you create in that Webflow embed are going to get pulled into this list here so you can choose from it and see it. So I might grab this title class, add a H3 sort of style to it, a margin bottom to rim to it, a font color too. So it's that secondary font weight. And then if we want to rename that class to change the margin bottom or the font size or anything, it's going to update across every page that that class is being used. We can copy all those utilities from one element to another. Tons of flexibility with this. So all that to say, there's 5 systems that are made up in Lumos, and the layout and the spacing system are what I would call more beginner friendly because they don't require going into a custom code embed to change these styles. They're just like a bunch of pre-written utilities for your layouts and your spacings that you wouldn't really have to change from project to project. 2rem is always 2rem. 2-column layout on a grid is always 2 columns. So we don't really have to customize these two. They're plug and play. And I broke these out into different systems because I know some people may only want to use the layout system in their project or may only be interested in a certain system. So you have that flexibility to just grab the code that pertains to layout and only use that with something else you're already using if you'd like. The layout system is probably the most powerful and my favorite of all the systems, followed closely by color. When we get into these bottom 3, this is where we're going to have to do some tweaking in a custom code embed to apply our values. So that's where it does take a little bit of finesse, but the payout in the long run is really worth it. So that's just a high-level overview. Just any questions so far of everything we covered, let me know. And if not, we'll jump into the Figma build.
Yeah, I think we can jump into the Figma and then we'll just do the questions at the end.
Perfect. Okay. So what I'll do is head back over to Webflow. And so the first thing I usually do, this is the Figma file, and actually I do want to let everyone know there is a link if you do want to follow along to a Webflow clonable and I'll just put this in chat, that I'll be starting from, the style guide. And at the description at the bottom of that link is also the link to the Chrome extension if you want to add that, and the link to this Figma file. So everything you need to follow along is there. So usually when we're starting, I have this style guide built out in Figma with typography, colors, everything like that. This uses Figma variables. There's a whole Figma style guide for Lumos that you can start from, and it gives you a lot of benefits. But Figma variables support color. They support things like border radius. The only things they don't support currently are typography values and border widths are the two things that aren't supported in Figma variables. So because of that, I use a plugin called Token Studio. And if you just open this up, it'll have all my tokens saved in here. And this is what I use to manage typography and border width, just for those things. So a lot of these styles, my FS1, font style 1 is H1 through H2 through H6, and FS7 is paragraph. So that's all saved in here, and they're made up of other variables. So you'll notice we have, if I edit this token, it's using font family 2, font weight 3, line height 4. So these are reusable variables. These are the ingredients that we can use across all of our heading styles. So the first thing I usually do is just go in order from Webflow. So I'll start with typography, then to color, all the way down the list, and just add these in. So we can hop back over to Webflow. And this is the style guide. I basically just added in a couple assets, a couple collections we'll need to build this. And we'll just see how far we can get today, how many sections we can build out. But the biggest part of the setup is going to be these styles. So this is going to take a little bit of time to set it up. And then from there, the building out should go a lot quicker. So we'll head over to the typography page of the style guide. And these are all our different styles. They match the things that we have in Figma. So all of our different font weights, these are actual utility classes we can add, and our line heights, and they match the styles we have here in Figma, all the same things here. So the first thing I usually do is set up these font families, font weights, all the ingredients. So if we head to our custom code embed, let's open typography embed. I'll zoom in a little bit just to help. And let's see. We're going to go to these collection of variables. These are the ingredients we have here. So our font family 1, this is usually what I apply to the body and paragraph text. And it's this font here. So we just need this to match the way we named the font when we uploaded it to Webflow. I uploaded these 2 fonts, and now we're just going to set up these font families. So we have our paragraph font family, and then a font family for all of our headings, which is font family 2. And I'll just copy that, the name of that font, and add it in here. And since we're adding a new font family variable, we're also going to add a utility class. So if we want to add this utility onto paragraphs, for instance, even if the default font family on paragraphs is font family 1, we could add this class onto paragraphs to change their font family. And that's just linked back to that same variable. So the advantage to this being stored in variables is we can use it across multiple headings, and say we want to update the font family across all of our headings in the future. We don't have to go to each heading one by one to change this. We only change it in this one place. It updates across the board. So then we'll head over to our font weights. So I have a 400, 800, and 900 weight in Figma. So I'll do 400, 800, 900. And then we have our line heights. These are set in unitless line heights. They're 1.5. In Figma, that is 150%. So we just move the decimal point over one place. So I have 150, 130, 110, and then an 85%. So these are all the same. And then my 85% would convert over to 0.85 for line height 4. For our letter spacings, letter spacing 1 is 0%. Letter spacing 2 is 4%. So I'm going to delete this and add 0.04 EM. And these are set in M so that when we reduce the font size on each breakpoint, the letter spacing is also going to scale down with that font size. We don't have to keep redefining the letter spacing, but the font sizes themselves will be set in rems. And then for the text transforms, we really don't have to change these from project to project. Text transform 2 is always going to be uppercase in every Lumos build. Text transform 3 is always capitalized. So these will stay the same across every project. So once we have those set, we can go ahead and start setting up our individual heading styles. And the first thing I usually do is apply styles to the body. This is similar to body all pages tag in Webflow. And we usually set that to match our paragraph style. So I can right click on this FS7, the paragraph, and edit token. And what we have here is font family 1, font weight 1, and that's what we're seeing here. And then line height 3, which is this 110%. So that's what should be here. We'll switch that over to line height 3. And then letter spacing is 2, letter spacing 2, which is this 4%. So we'll set that up here. And then text transform is text transform 2, which is uppercase. And we'll go ahead and add that. And then the font size on this paragraph is 14 pixels. So I'll set that on the body as 0.875 REM. So if we go ahead and save this, now we've updated all the text across our site because the headings are just inheriting from that body by default. So they're using the body's family, weight, line height, everything like that. Now, typically when we go to set up our headings, we would have to apply that font family, the weight, everything to each heading one by one. And Lumos, there's this grouping here of all the headings we can style from one place. So all of my headings here have this second font family, the heavy weight, line height 4, letter spacing 0, pretty much across the board. The H5 and H6 are the only ones that are slightly different. They're using the black weight instead of the heavy weight. So for that, we have all our headings here. We're going to switch them to font family 2. So they'll become this style if I save. And then we'll switch them to font weight 3, the heaviest weight. Line height was still 4, letter spacing 1. And then text transform will just inherit from the body. If we don't apply any of these styles to the headings, they'll just inherit from body. So we have that set, and then we might just want to go to our H5 here, and we might change the font weight because the H5 and the H6 were different. So even though they're included in the all heading styles up at the top, we can still override them even different from what those all heading groups are. So on this one, I'll switch it to the bold weight, and then I'll do the same for the H6. These two are the only two that have a different weight. So if we save that, the amount of time it would have taken to style each of these headings individually in Webflow would have been huge. And here it's applied it not only to the class version, but also to the all H2, H1 tag. So we're styling the class and the tag all from one place. So there is quite a bit of a learning curve for sure. But the payoffs are definitely speed up some time in the end. So that is everything for the styles of those headings. The only thing we're missing is the sizes of the headings. And then I have some pretty large headings here. Like if we take a look at this design, I have this heading, which is my H1, and that's pretty much spanning almost the full width of the container. This H2, I want it to always stay within these 5 columns. So if we use rim for this, it's just going to overflow and clip, and it won't quite work well. So what I'm actually going to use instead, and I learned this from a video by WebBay, is we're going to use 22 CQW, container query width. And this is based on the width of the container for the font size. So that means it's going to scale with the width of the container. When our container hits its max width and it stops growing, this font size will stop scaling. It's similar to viewport width, but it's different because if the user backs down their font size and the container shrinks, the viewport width heading would overflow, even if we had like a media query setting it to not. So this is just going to be linked always to the width of the container. And then for this FS2, I may change the font size on this one. It's another large one, so I'm only going to do this for the large headings. I'll do 12 CQW, container query width. And then for the H3, we'll just do 6 rem. For the H4, let's do 4 rem. And for the H5 and the H6, we'll just leave the 2 and 1.5. And then we can also, for each breakpoint, adjust these font sizes. So here on tablet, we could change it. There's some default responsiveness baked into this, which I'm just going to leave for now, but we could change for each breakpoint how that works. So if we save this, and I'm just going to come to a larger screen size. So here's my large headings. If I were to take this container and let me just change the max width on it, let's say 50 rem or something. So notice when I'm growing and shrinking the container max width, the text inside is growing and shrinking. So it's completely linked to the width of the container. And also if the user were to bump down their font size, bump it up, that's all going to grow and shrink, the container, the text, everything. So That is good. So that's really everything needed to set up typography. I mean, this might have been, I don't know, 15 minutes to set up type, but it sets us up for the rest of our whole project. The next thing we have is color. So type and color are the biggest ones to set up. And for color, there's, I'm using Figma variables here. I'll head over to this local variables. We'll go to color modes. So here we have what all these elements should look like in light mode and what they should look like in dark mode, what our primary button looks like, what our outline button looks like in both modes, what our nav link looks like. So all these are saved in variables. I'm going to head to the global swatches. These are the colors that we'll use. Let's open up our embed. Let's go open up our color embed. And we'll scroll up to the HTML element, which is where our swatches are defined. So I have a dark one here, and I'll just click on this in Figma and change it from RGB to, sorry, actually we do want RGB, and it's 34, 34, 34 across the board. So here we have 34, 34, and we'll change that. There is no dark 2 in this design, so I can just remove that. If you had a couple different shades of dark colors and light colors, you could add them in here. And here, I'm also saving the same color at a 70% and 20% opacity. You have to do that in Figma. And Lumos, you don't need to save each opacity, just the main swatch is fine. And then if we come over to this light color, it looks like we're at 238 across the board. So I'll just add this into light 1, like so. And then we will delete light 2. And then let's head over to brand 1. And here, these are some custom numbers, so I'll just throw that in. This is the pink color. We got 180 and 186. So I'll just add this in. 186. All right, so if we save this, it's changed a lot of our colors to use this new system here. I did notice the light isn't quite right. Okay, I see what's going on. So we have some font colors that are missing. So let's go ahead and start setting this up, what we want each thing to look like. So we'll head over to color modes. Our background color here inside light mode, we're just going to go all the way down light mode and set this up. So for our light mode, which is right here, our background color is light 1, and that's correct. And our font color should be dark 1, and that's right. And then our font color 2 should be dark 1 at 70% opacity, and it is dark 1, 70% opacity. Our border color 1, this is the main border color. Anytime we create a border in Lumos, if we don't apply a color, it'll get border color 1 by default. So this is our primary border color. That is going to be dark 1 at 20% opacity inside light mode, and border color 2 is dark 1 at full opacity. So all that was correct. We can head over to our button mode primary, and its background color is going to be brand 1, and that matches, and its font color is dark 1, and that matches here. And then on hover, the background color should change to dark, and the font color should change to light 1. Dark and light 1. Then we can head over to the secondary, the outline version of this button. So the border color is dark 1 at 20% opacity. That matches. Font color is dark 1 at full opacity, and that matches. On hover, the background will be dark, the border will be dark, and the font color will be light. So we have dark, dark, and this should be light 1 since there's no light 2. And then for our link, I have one link mode here that I'm using. So dark, and then on hover, it becomes dark at 70% opacity. So we're setting these up, and we're setting up color profiles for things like links, for things like an outline or solid button. Once we have these created, we can reuse it across everything throughout our site. So play buttons, slider arrows, social media buttons. So it is a little bit of a setup work, but now we have global control to, even when we keep adding new types of buttons throughout the site, we can update their styles from one place instead of having to apply those styles. So then we can head over to dark mode. And so our background color is dark 1. Our font color is going to be brand 1. So I'll switch this over. Our font color here, font color 2. So this is like a secondary text color we can use if we want, is brand 1 at 70% opacity. Our border will be brand 1 at 20% opacity. And this border color 2 will be brand 1 at full opacity. So it'll be solid. And then for our button, its background will be brand 1 and its font color will be dark 1. And then on hover, it's going to go to be a light background color and dark font color inside dark mode. And then for the outline button, we have brand 1 at 30% opacity. So I'll switch this over. That should be the border for this outline button. And its font color is just going to be brand 1 solid. And then on hover, let's see what we're doing. We're going brand 1 for the background and border on hover. And we're going to be going dark 1 for the font color. And then for this link mode, we're just going to set it to be brand 1 at full opacity by default. And when we hover our link, we're going to change it to light at full opacity. So that's really everything we need to do. Now, if we save and close, we have this here. And this is, we can grab our whole section. You'll notice we have this button we just set up. The solid one is hovering dark, and then the outline one's hovering dark. And then if we switch this whole section over to dark mode, the solid one's hovering light and the outline one's hovering pink. So we have full control of what we want those hover colors to be. Seen with this link, it's hovering white for our link modes. And we can use this link mode. It's just a utility class, link mode 1. We can use it across multiple links throughout our whole site. And if we want to change the hover color for all of our links, only change it in one place. So yeah, that's...
Sorry, I had to.
Nice. Last one, and that's going to be our global styles for our utilities. These are just miscellaneous styles, things like border radius, border width, section padding, container padding. All that falls under this utilities. The layout and spacing are the two things we don't really have to change. We can just start using them. So we'll head over to custom code. We'll head over to utilities, and let's start setting it up. So I'll start with the section paddings. There's 3 different sizes of section padding, top and bottom, that I want to use throughout my site. If I head to local variables and I head to sizes, and we scroll down to section. So we have section top, and there's a small, medium, large, and section bottom, small, medium, large. These are the same values in my case, but sometimes you'll have larger bottom paddings on a section than top paddings. So you have that control here. For this section top, I actually want it to match my containers left and right padding, which is 3 rem. So these two should be the same. And when I change the container padding on different breakpoints, this small section top and bottom should be linked to that container padding. So we have a container padding here called page padding 1, and it's 3 rem on desktop. We shrink it down to 1.5 rem on tablet, and we shrink it down again on landscape, and then again on portrait. So instead of having to manually shrink that small section padding, top and bottom, I can just link it in one spot to page padding 1. And then when I adjust the page padding 1 across each breakpoint, that section top and bottom padding will also change. It will just always match the container left and right padding. So those are linked. Then we have our medium size, which is 9 rem. So these are using the Lumos spacing system, which shrinks a little bit on each breakpoint. It's adaptive right out of the box. So it'll be 9 rem on desktop, and it'll just keep shrinking a little bit all the way across. And then for our largest version of section padding, we're using 11 rem. So I'll just go ahead and plug that in here. And that's pretty much it. For max width on the container, I usually take the width of the whole design and just divide that by 16. So the width of my frame here is 1440. I pretty much always design at 1440 nowadays. So if we do 1440 divided by 16, that's 90 rem. So I'll usually set my container to be the width of my design, 90 rem. And then we just add a little bit of left and right padding inside that container, which is what we're seeing here. It's that page padding of 3 rem. So that's pretty much it for that. For the border radius, I think we did change that one for this. It's 4 pixels here. So 4 divided by 16, 0.25. And then the border radius 2 is still 16. The border radius 3 is the pill. So that's good. And then border width, that is saved in Token Studio. And that one is 1.5 pixels. So anything like 2 pixels or below, I usually set border width using pixels. It doesn't really need to scale or with font size. So we have that set. And that's literally everything we need to do to set up the Lumos style guide. We did it. I know it's Yeah, it's a lot, but it's done, and now we can actually build.
No, but I'm like in shock because it's
Awesome.
just so detailed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the smallest, down to the smallest thing. But yeah, it matters. All
Exactly.
right. So now we can build. So we're going to start with this hero section, and I'll just go ahead and delete inside my page main the section we have so far, and we'll add a section element, and we'll give this a class of hero wrap. Usually the start of any component in Lumos is called wrap. In the Lumos docs, there's a full list of recommended class names to use. So wrap is how we define the start of a component. And then inside the section, we'll drop in a container, and I'll just give this a class of hero contain. And you'll notice, let me drop a heading in here. We'll do an H1. So you notice the section already has some default top and bottom padding. That's coming from our top and bottoms in our variables. So it's the main size. If we want to go with a small size, we could just add vertical top 1. And now we have the smallest, and we could do the same thing on the bottom, vertical bottom 1. Or if we say most of our hero wraps need to have the main size, but maybe one of them needs the small size, we could stack it on vertical bottom, vertical top, and it works this way too in the class name or
Tim,
stacked on top. Yeah.
I just have a question because now we're getting like into the nitty gritty. And Maria did ask, is there like a cheat code for the names?
Yeah, so they're all in the extension, and also under the Lumos docs, if we head to the the utility classes. So this is a list of every utility class available in Lumos, and you can also filter them down by type. So if I'm only interested in the spacing ones, for instance, these are all the spacing utilities available in Lumos: margin top, margin bottom, padding bottom, padding top. Same for, so everything I'm covering today is in here, and just a list of all utilities.
Okay. I don't know, should I leave? Maybe I'll leave the rest of the questions for later.
Yeah, just, I mean, let me know if it's relevant right now. We can definitely answer it now. Yeah, either way is fine.
Yeah, I think at the end, because it's just more like general.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
All right, yeah, so that default container is on, padding is on our container. That default padding is on our hero, and we have some text in here. So this text right here is using my H4 style. I actually don't want an H4 in here. I only want an H1. So I'm just going to drop in a text block since it has no SEO kind of hierarchy there. And I'll give this text here, the class of hero text, and then I'll add my FS for utility. So that's my H4 style there in that class name. And then we can copy the text and throw that on. There's also some space between these two, set to 16 pixels, one rim. So I could do that a lot of ways with gap or anything, but I'll just use margin. So I can add a margin bottom 1, which is one rim, to that hero text, and it just spaces it down. And then for this one here, we'll give it the class of hero title. Text is usually your smaller thing within a component. Title is your larger one, and there's also a sub, which is a medium that goes in between. So that's how we name these. And then we can go ahead and copy this, throw it in there. And I'm going to grab the whole section, the whole hero wrap, and do text align center. And I'll give it a min height of 100 VH, so it covers the full screen. And we'll apply flex, vertical, and justify center. So we get it right there in the middle, and it's covering like so. And then from there, I can drop in a button. We have a button with link. So there's some pre-done components in Lumos, and all of the color modes that we set up can be styled with classes or data attributes. So my color mode 1 here, I could switch to color mode 2, which is the outline button. And we can do that with anything. If I have my play button, color mode 1 or color mode 2. So anything we do, we can style with class or attributes if it's a color mode. And here, I believe the margin bottom on this large heading was 2 rim. So I can just grab this hero title and add a MB2, margin bottom 2 rim. And there we go. So that's all for this first section. And then we'll have the section right below it is this tour dates section. I'll just zoom in a little bit. There we go. All right, so we're going to drop a section in here. We'll give it a class of tour wrap. Inside that, we'll have a container. I'm using the native Webflow section and container. We'll call this tour contain. And inside that, we'll just drop, we have a grid here. So we're going to need a 12-column grid, and this is going to take up some of the columns. The side will take up the other columns. So inside the contain, I'll drop a div, and I'll just give this the class of tour list. List is pretty reused class name we'll use in lots of places. Anytime we're creating a grid, anytime we're using a CMS list, a list of items, anything can be a list, but it's just a good name to use. And then we want this to have a display of grid. So if you're to use the Lumos layout system, we add GD1 in the class name, which just sets this to display of grid. That's all it's doing. It's taking this, setting it to display grid. And then we define the number of columns we want on this grid and the breakpoint that we want. So I'll set a column desktop 12. That means this will be a 12-column grid on the desktop breakpoint. And then anything below desktop, it will revert to just being a single column grid because these are mobile first. So the styles we apply will apply to desktop on up. So if I switch this to column tablet 12, my grid will be a 12-column grid on, and if I hit this, you can actually preview it a little bit better. But yeah, it'll be a 12-column grid on tablet up to desktop, and then below tablet, it will revert to being just a single column grid, like so, because they're mobile first, so they carry up to the desktop breakpoint. So I only want this to be a 12-column grid on desktop up, so we'll just leave column desktop 12. And then we have a left and a right. So I'll name this tour left, and this needs to be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns. So we'll give it a column desktop 7, and it'll span across 7 of our 12 columns. And then inside that, we'll add an H2, and we'll just copy this text and throw it in here. And let me add a space there. Let's give this a class of tour title, since it's the largest thing in this section. And then inside of the list, I'll drop a div, and we'll give this the class of tour right. Oops, tour right. And this one, I believe, is 5 columns. So we'll add a column desktop of 5. We have a 5 column and a 7 column. And inside here, we can add, let's see what this was. This is our H4 style. So I'll just have a text block. We'll give this a class of, since this is, I'll call this tour text, and then we'll call this FS4. And then we'll add our text in here. And while we're at it, let's just give it some margin bottom, be 2, I guess, for now. And then inside this, we'll add a collection list. And then we'll go ahead and pull this from our tour dates collection. So here I'll have a tour CMS wrap. So I'm adding this extra name in the middle to differentiate from the wrap on my entire section of tour, or even the list on my entire list of tour. We want to add this extra section in. So this will be tour CMS list. And that way it's different from this list. And then we'll have a tour CMS item. All right. And on the item, we have this border, and it only applies to the top of the item, like so. So we can apply a border width 1. So there's a couple different border widths we have, and the 1 is the 1.5 pixels. And that would apply the border to every side of the item. Let me just give it some padding so we can see. Every side, we only want to apply that border to the top of the item, though. So we can just add T for top, B for bottom. There's left, right, vertical, or horizontal. So we can choose the directions we want the border. And I'll just only put it at the top. So there we go. And that's linked to that border width, 1.5 pixels. So if we change that in our embed, it's going to update the border width on this element, which is great. And then we'll just drop in some text blocks. So I have a location and a date. They need to be grouped together in a div, so they stay on this side. And then we have ticket information that'll be on that side. So we'll just drop let's add a div real quick. I'll call this, we'll call it tour CMS content, like so. I'll drop a text block inside. We can go ahead and pull that from the location name. We will go ahead and duplicate it. We'll change this to be the location date. We'll change that like so. We will grab the tour CMS content, apply flex to go this way. And I can add some gap using my utility, gap 1, I guess, for now. And then I want this to be font colored too. So I could just add font color 2 like so, and that's this grayed out version. But then if I have this module in multiple pages throughout my site and I want to change this, I can't because it's just a one-off class. So it's always better to just have a custom class, Tour CMS text with font color 2 attached to the end of it. And that way, if I want to do other things with this, like change the font weight or something in the future, I can update across all pages by renaming the custom class. So that's that little part there. And then we just have the, I'll go ahead and give this while we're at it, tour CMS title, just for consistency. So hopefully you start to see like how we can keep reusing these and we're just drilling in. So we had a title here, we had a text here, and now because we're in CMS, we can have title and text again. And we just keep drilling into this and reusing the same convention over and over. So then we have text box, and this just needs to say get tickets. And if you want to continue that pattern, so here we end ourselves up. We can do tour CMS link wrap because link is a new component, but then we're getting pretty far into a long class name. So if I had a link somewhere else out here in this section, then I would have to do this. But because I don't, I can just do tour link wrap. Start it as a new component that's independent of being in the CMS. It could be used inside or outside the CMS as long as it's in tour. And that shortens up my class name a bit. And I'll actually just convert that to a link right here. And then inside that, I'll add the text box. And then I also need the icon. So I'll just come over here. I'll copy SVG. There we are. We'll add an embed inside our, oops, what did I just do? I think I jumped to a different page, my bad. So in here, we'll add an embed. Because my cursor was near that drop-down option. Embed, there we go. Okay, so what I could do here, I could change this to 100% width, 100% height. I'm sure we've all done this before. Fill current color, like all that stuff we have to do to make the icon match the font color and be full. But there's actually a utility that does this for you in Lumos. And I can just give this a class of tour link SVG. And then there's an icon 1 utility that automatically links it to font color and sets it to be 100% within height of its parent. So that is good. And then this little icon here is 12 pixels by 12 pixels. So I'll just throw that in. I'm hitting 12 space enter, and that's part of the Lumos Chrome extension as well, is that it's converting the pixels to rem for me by hitting the space key and the enter key. And then I'll also just apply flex to this. And then I might give this a gap of 0.5 rem just to space them out. And I might grab my whole item and apply flex and then distribute. Maybe give this a gap of 2 rem or something like that. Maybe 1 rem's fine. And remove the left and right. Maybe reduce this. So if I use the adaptive padding, then this will shrink on each breakpoint, and I don't want it to shrink. So this is where I'm going to apply my own padding instead of using the utilities for top and bottom. And that's pretty much it for that. So because we're using this grid, it's going to stack one tablet breakpoint, and that's just because we set this to column desktop. If I would have switched this to column tablet, then this would have stayed, it would have kept the layout all the way down. So if I switch these to column tablet, so then it stays a 2-column layout on tablet, and then it reverts to being full column right under tablet. So we can really easily, no matter what breakpoint we're on, just rename the classes to make changes to our layout. And then I might just want a little bit more gap on this grid here that's separating the 2 columns. So you can add it in the utility, or we can add it right here. And I'll just use the utility for this. Let me remove that. Let me remove the gap real quick. Okay. So I don't want to change the gap between these items. So we'll change gap vertical, top and bottom gap, and we'll set this to like 4 rem. And that way, when these items stack under each other, there's a good bit space between the two. And that'll just carry all the way down. And then here I might just change the flex so they stack like that. And that's pretty much good. So the last thing we're going to do is just, I'll drop this in a div in here. I'll call this something like hero image wrap, or let's call it home image wrap. And it's going to hold both of these sections because there's a background image that needs to apply to both sections, like so. So from there, I'll just set this home image wrap to position relative. I'll drop an image in here, and I'll set it to pull from my image I uploaded, and I'll give this a class of home image item, or base. Base is usually what we use for things that are absolute and they're behind everything else. So from there, the image, because in Lumos on the all image tag, the image is set to cover and 100% width by default, so we don't have to keep applying that. But we do need this to be absolute and 100% width and height of its parent. There's a utility for that called cover absolute, CA1, and it just sets it to position absolute, 100% width and height, and anchored towards the top left. So if I add that, this image is now going to cover this full section and be absolute. The only other thing is this text is dark here. So we can give this whole hero wrap a section mode 2, which is our dark mode section. And then there, now the text all becomes, the buttons and everything become the right color, the right hover states. And one other thing I might do is just grab this image and maybe turn down its opacity, like 70% or something, just to make the text more legible. But that pretty much builds out that first section. I was thinking we would get a lot farther within the hour, but I didn't want to just breeze through this. I wanted to really take the time to explain what each thing is doing and why it's important. So hopefully this maybe whets your appetite a little bit to at least try Lumos and gives you a little understanding of how to work with the utilities.
Yeah. Honestly, like, it always happens. Like, we always think that we can like cover the whole like landing page, but it's just there's so much information that it's almost impossible. But this is so crazy, Tim.
Awesome. Thank you.
It's amazing. So do you want to continue something before we go into questions?
We can jump into questions. I want to respect everyone's time, but I think what I'll probably do is create a separate tutorial where I'm building out the rest of this. Just so I was thinking I'd get through all of this today, and I think it just needed a bit more time. So
yeah,
cool.
Okay, great. Okay, so the first question we have is, well, it was sort of like a comment from Eric.
Okay.
He wanted to know if there is going to be any type of like integration where all of the Figma variables will autofill in Lumos in Webflow.
There's no plans for it currently. I looked into it. I know some people mentioned like storing your Figma, all this custom code in GitHub. And then there's, I think, an extension you can use in Figma to go from Figma to GitHub, but it just dumps all the variables at the top. Like up here on the HTML, it wouldn't handle this part of like assigning the right thing to the right section mode in the right place. So I think for now, anyways, this does have to be a manual process with a little bit of human oversight instead of just an extension that dumps them over. So.
Okay, cool. Guys, after I have 2 more questions that I saved here. So after that, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, go for it. So now we're going to go with David. So he says, to reiterate, we can use a part of the Lumos framework example, the typography, and inject it into an existing project, right?
Yeah, so each of these are their own embed. So like for typography, you could just copy all this code and bring it over to an embed in your existing project and just use this here without having to use the rest of the systems. And actually the layout and spacing systems are linked externally. They're hosted through JS Deliver. So you could even just add this one layout tag or this one spacing tag, and you've imported the whole layout and the whole spacing system just from adding this one thing. So any parts of these can be used independently of each other.
Cool. And what happens if they want to, for example, use a website that was built with client first, but they want to use the grid system? Can they input that code and start using the classes?
Yeah, yep. Like I said, just add this one layout link and it imports the whole grid system into your project, and then you can use it anywhere with any project. So
okay, cool. Josh asks, does the order of entering the utility classes matter? No, right? I think you said that at the beginning.
no, you can enter them in any order. I just like to go down the list, like typography, color, utilities, but you can jump to whichever point. So
Okay, cool. Richard asks, which needs to be the process to apply the existing Webflow project with other systems? Okay, so I guess it's the same answer. Just drop that first line of code.
yeah. If it's typography, you'll need the whole embed. If it's color, you'll need the whole embed. But the layout and spacing ones are just those single links at the top.
Okay. Andy asks, I can see how this would limit the code. And does that have a significant difference on page load speed? I was actually wondering the same.
I don't think it'll make a huge difference on page load. It's more so just like the maintenance of this going into the future. If we need to change things like our section padding, our page padding, our border width, border radius, if we do it this way, we can have global control in the future of those design choices. So it's more so a better maintenance than it is faster load time. It'll help the load time, but not anything significantly. So.
Mm-hmm. And Richard asks, can this be can he use Code Sandbox, because he doesn't really doesn't like the embeds from Webflow?
Yeah, you can use Code Sandbox while you're working on the project. I always recommend to move your code off of Code Sandbox once it's complete. But from there, you could host it on GitHub and go to JS Deliver, which is how I'm hosting this, completely for free. And it's a super reliable, scalable hosting service for free that you can move all your code to once you're finished working on the project.
Mm-hmm. Cool. David has a specific question about the column grid.
Okay,
So you used the CD7 and the CD5 for the 12 column grid, right?
Yeah.
So he asks, when should we use start X to specifically place items instead of using CD7 and CD5?
So CD column desktop is to say how many columns this item should span over. So for instance, I may set this item to only span 5 of the 7 columns, but what if I still want this second one to start on this column? That's when you would use start. So it's starting on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I believe. It's starting on the 8th column. So I could add to this a start desktop 8, and it'll push it over to where it's starting on that 8th column. Or I could change that to start desktop 7, and it'll start right there. So the start classes are just for choosing which column it starts on, and the other classes are choosing how many columns it spans over, like so.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think that's it. I mean, it's been an hour and I know you're super busy, so I don't want to slam you with more questions. So whenever you do the tutorial, just let us know, tag us or whatever, just so we can all watch, because I feel like people are super excited to use this, Tim.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
Of course. Thank you so much. It was really, really awesome. And yeah, we'll leave it here. And thank you so much.
Awesome. Have a great one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.